welcome to The Autograph with me, Susan Madaris. This week I am joined by Susan Lindauer. She's joining us to tell us about her story from being an intelligence asset to an imprisoned whistleblower. Do join us. Susan Lindauer is a journalist, author, and anti-war activist. However, she is perhaps best known as being the first CIA asset to speak out under her own name on record regarding the specific and detailed foreknowledge of the 9/11 attacks throughout the months prior to 9/11 by the CIA, and more specifically, her CIA handler, Richard Fuchs. From 1993 to 2002, she performed as a U.S. intelligence asset covering Libya and Iraq at the United Nations as a back channel on matters of anti-terrorism. In the summer of 2001, her team warned about a major terrorist attack involving airplane hijackings and a strike on the World Trade Center. Lindauer also campaigned heavily against the war in Iraq and developed a comprehensive peace framework through her back channel in the run-up to war. In Extreme Prejudice, the terrifying story of the Patriot Act and the cover-ups of 9/11 and Iraq, Lindauer shares with her readers what happened when she tried to disclose the true facts of Iraqi pre-war intelligence and the 9/11 warning to Congress and the American people. It details the nightmare of her arrest on the Patriot Act and her one-year imprisonment without trial at the notorious Carswell prison inside a Texas military base, where she was threatened with indefinite detention and forcible drugging to keep her quiet.
Procedure, these are FBI agents.
We're activists and I'm innocent. I did more to try to stop terrorism in this country than anybody else. I've done good things for this country. I worked to get the weapons inspectors back into Iraq. When everybody said it was impossible, I worked to do it. And I'm very proud, and I will very proudly stand by my achievements. I'm very proud of what I've done for this country, for the good of the security of this country.
After 5 years of indictment without a conviction or guilty plea, the Justice Department dismissed all charges 5 days before U.S. President Barack Obama's inauguration.
I learned about the 9/11 attack in April of 2001. I was summoned by my CIA handler to his office, and he said he had a message that he wanted me to deliver to the Iraqi embassy. I had functioned as a back channel to Iraq from August of 1996 onwards, right up to the war. And so I had built, with the knowledge of the Iraqi government and the CIA, I had established myself as a communication point, which was supposed to be very positive. But part of that was that when Washington had a message to deliver to Baghdad, I would be called to give it. And I was very happy to do that because I believe in dialogue. But this time, in April of 2001, I was summoned, and he said he had a message. The United States government was demanding that Iraq hand over any intelligence involving airplane hijackings and or airplane bombings and a strike on the World Trade Center. And I was supposed to give the message that if Iraq received that information and failed to deliver it through my back channel, then the United States would declare war on Iraq.
So how did your clandestine life initially begin? Because when we talk about a CIA asset, more often than enough, viewers might have the impression that you were a covert operative for the CIA. That wasn't the case.
That was not the case. I was a passionate anti-sanctions activist, and I am passionately anti-war. And so the Bill Clinton administration decided they would try to co-opt me. And they said, look, you hate sanctions, and you've been campaigning so hard against the sanctions and the war on Iraq. Why don't you try to work on something from the inside where you can establish a back channel to the Iraqi embassy, and we'll try to see if you can help. You can, for your part, you can try to work to end the sanctions, and so I had to actually go to the Libyans and to the Iraqis and to explain my position and what I wanted to do. And either of the Libyans or the Iraqis could have rejected it immediately. They had to agree, and they knowingly did so.
Susan Lindauer tried to explain to the Bush administration, initially through her second cousin, Andrew Card, who was also White House Chief of Staff, and former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell, that invading Iraq was counterproductive, would have catastrophic consequences, and above all, was unnecessary, because according to her pre-war intelligence, Iraq was willing to give the U.S. anything it asked in return for peace. The warnings fell on deaf ears in Washington, and Lindauer was accused of being an Iraqi agent.
I'd like to tell you that from the end of the Clinton administration and the very first days of the Bush administration, we began to hammer out a comprehensive peace framework with the Iraqi government. The CIA was making all sorts of outrageous demands on Iraq, and Iraq wanted the sanctions off so badly that it was willing to give the United States every single thing we demanded. Weapons inspections that would be unconditional, cooperation with anti-terrorism efforts, which included allowing the FBI to send a task force into Baghdad with authorization to conduct investigations and make arrests in Iraq of Iraqi potential citizens and guests, okay? And after 9/11, Iraq tried to give financial documents on Al-Qaeda to the United States, which the United States refused to take. Those financial documents would have allowed the United States to shut down the financial pipeline feeding terrorism around the world, okay? Whether you like terrorists or not, you have to realize that cutting off their cash would cripple their operations. And instead, the United States went after Muslim charitable donations, which is definitely not, nobody with any brains would think that Muslim charitable donations are feeding terrorism. Buying food for children in schools and hospital care and health care and social services for the poor is the best protection we have against violence, because it gives people a hope in the future, and it gives them a place in the future. But Iraq was offering us the real documents from early al-Qaeda figures tied to Ramzi Youssef and the 1993 World Trade Center attack. This would have been profoundly valuable. This was the real stuff. And so, you know, Iraq was offering us weapons inspections, significant cooperation on the World Trade, on terrorism. Saddam had the best tracking of terrorists. The other thing that he tried to give the United States, he offered the United States preferential contracts in any reconstruction phase after sanctions in the following areas: healthcare and pharmaceuticals, hospital supplies, transportation. He offered to buy 1 million American-made automobiles every year for 10 years. He offered to make American company, it had to be non-dual use, okay? It couldn't be military uses, but any kind of equipment for factories that would allow them to restart their industries. All of that, telecommunications, was going to feature American corporations very heavily. And then there was oil. The tragedy was, and I personally visited the U.S. oil companies. I want you to know this. I personally went to Chevron, Texaco, and ExxonMobil, and Occidental. And I told them so that they would know that Iraq was not threatening to shut them out of the oil industry. Iraq had already made contracts with France and Russia.
All of this to prevent a war.
This was a year before the invasion, and the whole package was put together in the first 2 years of the Bush administration. This was not a last-minute thing. This was already well established. The democracy reforms came after 9/11, and the promise to give the financial records on Al-Qaeda came after 9/11. However, Saddam offered to allow the FBI to go into Baghdad 6 months before 9/11. And they were like, you know, that was kind of their answer. When I went in April of 2001 and threatened them with war, they said, well, why don't you send the FBI in and you can do whatever kind of investigation you need to do. And it was like Saddam had an answer for everything. And the United States was not going to allow peace to occur under any circumstances.
But at the final stages of the controversy and the conspiracy between the United States and Iraq, a lot of people were wondering why Saddam reacted the way he did. Why didn't he stand his grounds if he didn't have weapons of mass destruction?
Okay, actually, Iraq offered to allow the weapons inspectors to return to Baghdad in November of 2000. And they said they could be on the ground within 3 weeks. They said it would be a very short conversation because they were already in agreement that it could start immediately. And Colin Powell went in front of Congress and he gave a very interesting speech to Congress, and he said, oh, the conversation with the Iraqis would be on the weapons inspections would be very short. And the reason it would be short was because the Iraqi ambassador had already agreed. From November 2000 until February of 2002, the Iraqis said over and over again, yes, 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 yes. Every time we asked them for anything, the answer was automatically, absolutely, you can have that. And it was like free picking. It was like the CIA could have anything it wanted from Baghdad, but the United States would not allow peace to happen.
Accused as being an Iraqi agent, Lindauer was arrested under the Patriot Act by the FBI.
For starters, after 9/11, Israel was the only foreign government trolling to buy national security documents in Washington. Iraq didn't need them. Baghdad already had the best. They had the most devastating access in the Middle East. Powerful stuff. Israel coveted that access hungrily for what their arch-enemy in Baghdad could reveal. Because if Iraq didn't have it already, Saddam's government would know how to get it. The real treasure hunt after 9/11 was for financial or banking documents that would expose the cash network for key figures tied to Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda. Iraqi officials boasted they had financial documents of extraordinary value that would prove a Middle Eastern connection to the Oklahoma City bombing and the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. If so, Baghdad had not overstated the value of its cash. They wanted to trade that intelligence as part of a comprehensive settlement to lift the sanctions. By the summer of 2001, back-channel talks with Iraqi diplomats in New York were far advanced under the watchful eye of the CIA.